Chinese regime paid people to protest during Taiwanese president's New York visit. Chinese media says the U.S. would hit 1,300 key targets if there was a U.S.-China conflict. Study: World human rights erode at China's extending power. Less than 1 cent per person, UN food chief urges China to help millions in starvation.
Taiwan's intelligence chief said the Chinese regime paid people to protest against Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's visit while she was in New York on her way to countries in Central America. According to Japanese media, NHK Taiwanese National Security Bureau Director General Tsai Ming-yen accused the Chinese regime's hostilities at a parliamentary committee meeting in Taipei on Thursday, March 30th. About 500 people gathered in front of the hotel where President Tsai stayed to protest and chanted, "There is one China and no to Taiwan independence." The intelligence chief said the Chinese regime's consulate general in New York mobilized pro-China groups and paid individuals $200 a day for the protest. While in New York during a stopover on her way to Central America, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen said that the U.S. and Taiwan are closer than ever. Tsai also praised significant progress in economic and security cooperation between the two countries. During her stay in New York, Tsai received the Global Leadership Award from Hudson Institute, a New York-based think tank. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, warns of a serious confrontation in the U.S.-China relation if Tsai meets with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy during her stopover in Los Angeles next week. Tsai's visit comes during heightened tensions between the U.S. and the CCP over trade, human rights, and Taiwan's sovereignty. The CCP claims Taiwan as its territory and has threatened to use force to bring it under its control. Due to Chinese regime's threat, Taiwan continues to strengthen its defense capabilities amid growing concern that Beijing might invade the land in the near future. According to Taiwan News, Taiwan's military revealed on March 31st that the United States will deliver 400 Javelin missiles to Taiwan in 2023 and 2024, and 42 Javelin launchers were delivered to Taiwan late last year. Some Chinese media recently pointed out that a U.S. think tank submitted a report to the U.S. Department of Defense stating that if the U.S. and China came to a conflict, the U.S. military would attack 1,300 key targets in China and have a 5-step plan to attack the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. However, no foreign media has reported on it, and it was suspected to be fake news. Several Chinese media, such as NetEase and Tencent, claimed that the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, CSBA, an independent think tank in Washington, D.C., recently issued a report named Innovating for Great Power Competition, an Examination of Service and Joint Innovation Efforts, which proposes a 5-step plan. First, if there is a U.S.-China conflict, the U.S. will attack 1,300 key targets in China to reduce China's war potential. At the same time, there are reports that an American First Policy Institute also submitted a report to the U.S. government in mid-March mentioning the same content. NetEase added these targets include 200 military airfields, over 600 air defense bases, 190 underground military air defense facilities, over 200 military-industrial enterprises, and strategic targets such as the China-Russia energy pipeline, maritime transport corridor, and other important sites. And the U.S. will attack the DF-21D and DF-26B mobile anti-ship ballistic missile platforms. However, after investigation, the report Innovating for Great Power Competition, an Examination of Service and Joint Innovation Efforts by CSBA was published in January and had no words such as DF-21D or military airfields attack and some other keywords as reported by Chinese media. Also, the reporting time of many reports was inconsistent, and some articles didn't clearly explain the source of information. As a result, the outside world suspects the Chinese media is deliberately misleading public opinion. According to a recent study, China has made many member states at the United Nations Human Rights Council, UNHRC, compromise their values on human rights. The report released on March 29th by Verisk Maplecroft noted that at least 35 of the 47 UNHRC member states are in China's Belt and Road Initiative program. Most of them show issues in human rights practices. For example, in the 30 countries with high or extremely high risks of violating labor rights, 16 were against the BRI program. The report said that such projects are rampant with reports of worker rights violations, especially in countries where the government is weak and dishonest. The report says emerging markets drawn to China's lack of demands when it comes to human rights due diligence are likely to see an uptick in labor rights violations as the BRI expands. The UNHRC is described as an assembly of 47 UN member states that aim to promote and protect human rights globally. But instead of achieving the goal, the report said that China had used the council to avoid global criticism and whitewash its human rights records. It cites how the UNHRC stopped a U.S. proposal to debate Xinjiang in October 2022 when countries that voted in favor of Beijing, with countries that voted in favor of China being, again, those engaged in its infrastructure development projects. The Verisk Maplecroft research said perhaps the most surprising votes came from Muslim-majority states such as Indonesia, the UAE, and Qatar, pointing to Beijing's sizable leverage on states and in particular Belt and Road Initiative BRI signatories. As the world faces the risk of an economic crisis, the study expects that UNHRC countries that rely on China's money and debts will likely support Beijing at the UN and ignore the human rights problems that happen because of BRI projects. Such countries may include Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Cameroon. The report also mentioned China's disregard for civil and political rights, especially free speech and expression. But it was also found that most UNHRC states were doing the same, with 70% or 33 of them being high or extreme risks for these rights. It warned, the upshot is that international human rights norms may weaken at the expense of vulnerable populations, while businesses will have to navigate and decode competing and often conflicting views on what constitutes an abuse and what doesn't from the Council itself. According to David Beasley of the World Food Program, WFP, the organization is having trouble raising the $23 billion it needs this year to aid an estimated 350 million starving people in 49 countries. Last year, Beasley applauded increasing support from the U.S. and Germany and asked China, the Gulf countries, billionaires, and other governments to step up big time. He stated, right at this stage, I'll be surprised if we get 40% of it, quite frankly. According to him, the WFP was in a similar predicament last year. Still, he successfully persuaded the U.S. to increase its financing from approximately $3.5 billion to $7.4 billion, and Germany to increase its contribution from $350 million a few years ago to $1.7 billion. However, he doesn't think these countries will do it again this year. He said other countries need to step up, starting with China, the world's second-largest economy, which gave WFP just $11 million last year. Beasley applauded China for its success in substantially lessening hunger and poverty domestically, but reckoned it offered less than 1% per person last year compared to the U.S., the world's leading economy, which provided about $22 per person. He said China needs to engage in the multilateral world and be willing to provide critical help. They have a moral obligation to do so. Beasley said China has done an incredible job of feeding their people, and now we need their help in other parts of the world on how they did it, particularly in less developed countries like those in Africa. The head of the WFP and the Nobel Peace Prize winner warns that without additional billions of dollars to feed millions of hungry people, the globe will experience mass migration, unstable nations, and malnourished children and adults in the next 12 to 18 months.